Hi, everybody. It is Tubby and Koo's book stream. Time for our very first guest, which I'm really excited for y'all to see. Hopefully, some people join and listen to her read because she's amazing. I love her very much. And so today we have Kimberly Richardson. And so Kimberly B. Richardson is the author of several novels and short stories. She is also the owner of Viridian Tea Company, which is really awesome. We sell her tea in the bookstore. So if you've ever bought tea from us, it has been Kimberly's tea. And I know a lot of you have. And she's also a professional cemetery photographer and a devout Francophile. She's a recent transplant to New Orleans from Memphis. I'm so excited that she's here locally. I'm really excited to have her. And so now I'm going to give her the floor over to Kim, and she's going to read from her newest book. So welcome, Kim.
Hello.
Good
Hello,
morning.
world.
There's
I'm
Kim.
uh, I'm doing this from my garage in my new house, so just bear with me with all the background stuff. But thank you, Candace. I
Yes,
appreciate the introduction.
awesome.
So I'm going to be reading from my newest book, which was published through Pro Se Press in Arkansas, and it is called Jackie Verona: A Murder of Gypsies. A little bit of a background. I am fascinated with the Beat Generation. I read On the Road by Jack Kerouac. I actually visited his gravesite in Massachusetts. And I thought, would be cool to do a murder mystery set around that period of time. So Jackie Verona is this hip swinging black woman in a fictitious city called Moon City. And despite all the problems of 1957, Moon City is pretty liberal. So here we go. Okay. Don't look at me like that. You have no right to judge me. After all, this was your fault. You could have stopped me, perhaps. The figure stroked the cold cheek with its hand. Damn you! Don't you realize how much I love you? No matter what, I still love you. Of course, you never realized it. I wanted to bathe your body in milk and rose petals. I wanted to worship you and show you what it meant to be truly loved. But no. The figure got up from the floor and began to walk a slow circle around her. You gave your love to him, wasted it on him. And now, this. Please, my darling, don't look at me like that. Here, let me close your eyes. The hand reached down to close her eyes. The figure smiled and dragged the dead girl out of the house to the garden, a trail of cold blood following them. When the ambulance attendants reached the backyard, they found a man kneeling next to the dead woman. I reached out to him and placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. He barely acknowledged it as his eyes focused on her. She wore only a white slip as she lay face down in the middle of the garden while orchids surrounded her in a beautiful circle. Creepy. Her head was turned to the left, eyes closed. Multiple stab wounds in her back looked as though her body wept dry, bloody tears. She was barefoot. I bent down and brushed back her hair from her face. Damn, Diane. The two men waited by the door as I gently pulled the man up and led him to the side. Clovis, I said as I took his face in my hands, they're here for her. His green eyes stared into my brown ones, yet I knew that he couldn't hear me. Didn't want to. My burnt caramel colored hands seemed to glow on his pale skin as I shook his head a little. Clovis, I repeated. The men. He blinked several times and slowly nodded as I pulled him back and looked at the ambulance attendants. The two wore blank faces. Did they feel anything when they had to do this part of their jobs, I wondered? Did it faze them at all? They rolled the stretcher next to the body. Then, as one, they bent down and gently lifted the body onto the stretcher. She looked as though she weighed less than a feather. Clovis turned to watch them, staring at her. Her eyes remained closed as one of her hands fell off her lap and dangled on the side. Before I could say anything, Clovis ran to her and kissed her hand as tears fell down his face. One of the men walked up to him, placed a hand on his back, then took her hand from him and placed it on her stomach. The two men then began to wrap up the body in a cloth while Clovis continued to watch, with red, teary eyes. I needed a cigarette. Sir, please move away from the body. I looked up and saw a policeman dressed in a three-piece black suit standing in the doorway, a black pork pie hat adorning his head. Please, move away. I walked up to Clovis and placed a hand on his arm. No, said Clovis as he gently removed my hand from his arm. I want to be near her. He looked at the cop, tears running down his face from bloodshot eyes. That's my sister, Diane. Sir, you'll have to come downtown to help us, replied the cop in a somewhat gentle tone. I'm sorry for this. Do you know what could have happened? Nothing, said Clovis as he shook his head as he looked at his sister's body, almost daring her to wake up and tell everyone that it was a cruel joke. Everyone loved her. I wanted to do something to bring back life into that bloody shell. I loved her as though she was my blood sister. She didn't deserve to die. Such a sweet kid. But all I could do was just stand back and watch. A man dressed in velvet pants, a tattered smoking jacket, and no shoes came stumbling out of the house. I'd wonder where else Sylvain had been all this time, only to gasp as he walked toward the stretcher. His eyes were glassy and his clothes looked like he'd slept in them while he reeked of whiskey and French cigarettes, with bloodstains on his jacket. Clovis looked up as well, only to growl and race toward him, decking him hard across the face. You bastard, Clover yelled as he brought down a rain of blows on him. You murdered her! You murdered her! The cop tried to pull Clovis off him, yet Clovis was in a mood to fight. The other man cowered under the blows, screaming, I didn't do it! I didn't! Clovis grabbed him by his long curly hair and shook him while the cop continued to pull Clovis back. Clovis, I yelled, then raced up, tangled my arms in his, and pulled him back. No! The cop and I wrestled Clovis away from Sylvain, who was now weeping like a child. As I tried to calm Clovis down, the cop walked over to Sylvain. Your full name, sir, said the cop in that same no-nonsense tone. Sylvain Glass, sir, he replied as his body shook with sobs and pain dealt by Clovis. Sir, why is there blood on your jacket? Sylvain looked down, then pulled at it like he'd suddenly come alive. I don't know. I swear, I don't know. The cop tipped his hat back on his head, then sighed. I'm afraid, he said as he stood up and brushed the dirt off his pants, you'll need to come with us. He glanced at the ambulance attendant and nodded. They quickly wheeled the wrapped body into the house as the cop placed a hand against Sylvain's shoulder and led him toward his car. Lock him up, Clovis yelled as I placed my right hand on his chest and held him back. I lifted my left hand to his cheek and moved his face until his eyes locked on mine. He stared at me for a while, then his eyes softened. He crumpled against me, and I wrapped my arms around him. I'm so sorry, I whispered while rubbing his back. You need me to go with you to the police station? He pulled away and held my hands in his. Delight, come with me, he whispered. Turning to the officer who held Sylvain, he said in a clear voice, We're ready. So that's just a part of Jackie Verona, A Murder of Gypsies. And as you see, Diane, the sister of Clovis, has been murdered. And her lover, Sylvain, who's a swinging bohemian, has no idea how she was killed. And if you want to find out the rest, well, just get a copy of it. See that? Oh, and actually on the cover, that's me. I tried to do a self-portrait of myself being all cyberpunk, and my publisher thought that it was a good idea to make it as the cover. So yeah, that's just a little bit of the reading. So I'll take any questions if you have any.
Thanks, Kim. That reading was awesome. Let me see on the comments if anybody has any questions for Kim. Make it a comment and I can bring it up on the screen and we can answer your questions if you have any.
Okay.
Not sure.
I do want to say for the record that I have been visiting New Orleans ever since I was a kid, and I fell in love with the city at a young age. And I thought, this city is way more me than Memphis. And this has taken years. And I think it's funny that I finally moved here during a pandemic. It took a pandemic to get me down here.
Well, I'm glad that you're here. And it doesn't look like anyone's having any questions, but
That's
maybe
perfect.
later on. But thank you very much for reading on our book stream. And everybody should buy Kim's book. I'm going to put it up on the screen. It's Jackie Verona. It is going to cover my face because Kim's face is better as the cover of this book. This is it. You can email us, and if you want a copy, and we will go ahead and set you up. So thank you very much, Kim. Have a good evening.
All right, you too. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone,
Bye.
for watching.